A problem nationwide, a lack of ballot understanding, and disenfranchised voters. One Detroit's Will Glover talked to reporters from ProPublica who looked into this.
Were you surprised at all that this is where reporting on kind of a confusing voting system took you, or was this the target?
It impacts 20% of the population who really kind of struggle with reading and don't necessarily have the wide range of kind of foundational abilities to help them get a driver's license, help them at the voting booth.
Our nation's history, obviously there were literacy tests up to 1965 that, prevented certain people from being able to vote. And we wanted to see, okay, what are the current challenges in the voting process?
Literacy's one thing, but how ballots presented can affect elections. In one Florida county, a researcher found ballot design led to 25,000 votes not being cast in a Senate race in which the winner, Rick Scott, won by just 10,000.
She, in her research, saw people, instead of reading the ballot, from column to column, they would try and read it all the way across. When you don't have clear markings showing people how to read a ballot, even that can result in people voting for someone they don't want to vote for, or incorrectly filling out the ballot and potentially risking having their vote thrown out altogether.
Comprehension and clarity. One Detroit contributors Stephen Henderson and Nolan Finley give us more to think about.
So is it too hard to vote in this country?
Well, I think for most people it's not. I think most of us are used to the systems and the processes. There's been a lot of changes and different procedures put in place, but I think for the most part, most of us can go in and figure out how to make the circle or draw the line or whatever it is and file the ballot. But I think there is a group of people out there for whom it's not so easy, and we should be paying attention to making it simpler for them. I mean, the ProPublica piece talks about people who can't read. Mm-hmm. So if you can't read, should you not be allowed to vote? And should you not get some sort of assistance with an audio ballot,
right,
where you just answered yes or no? Would that work? I don't think we should be adverse to figuring out new ways and better ways to do it. I worry about the ballot being so long and that people won't flip it over to vote in the races on the back. And I also think understanding the proposals as they're written on the ballot is just sometimes a difficult process, and you're not always voting for what you think.
And people are trying to trick you sometimes, right, on the ballot proposals. I think there's a real tension here between the kinds of technologies that are being created that make everything else in our lives easier, and the fear that those technologies, if you applied them to the voting space, would be taken advantage of, and that you'd end up with compromised elections. But if you think about it, the easiest way to vote would, at this point, be to do it the same way you do everything else, is on your phone. I mean, I do everything of importance on this phone. I pay bills, I buy things, I file my taxes, I move money around between banks and institutions, and I never blink an eye at the idea that it's dangerous.
You are taking a risk.
You are taking a risk.
And so, are we willing to take a risk with our elections and our vote? You know that as soon as a electronic voting system is put in place, there'll be someone out there trying to hack it. And we've all had our credit cards compromised, and we've all gotten notices from banks or financial institutions or retailers who say, "Oh, your information has been obtained through a hack or whatever." Do you want your voting information put at risk in that way, that somebody could track down and say?
Is that more vulnerable than your Social Security? I mean, seriously, I put my Social Security number into stuff on the phone when it asked me to do it. I put bank account numbers and all other kinds of things, because that's the way the world works. And if you think about it, all of these hurdles that we're talking about, you could clear pretty easily if you could develop technology on the phone, on the computer, someplace else. Audio voting, explanatory voting, participatory voting, like walking someone through the process, it'd be a lot easier.
It'd be a lot easier, but you do have to pay attention to security, because with an election, the first time we had an election that got hacked,
people would lose their minds.
People would lose confidence, and we already have a serious confidence deficit in our elections. So I'm not sure that precludes us from trying to get to a point where we can do things to help people vote who have a difficult time vote. For most of us, it's simple. If it's not simple, then you get disenfranchised from your democratic rights.
We also don't do a great job in this country of voter education. How do most people learn to vote? They either learn from their parents, that's how I learn, or they just show up and decide they're going to do it, and they got to kind of figure their own way through it. There isn't a whole lot of civic introduction to the idea of voting. What does that mean? What does that look like? We also need to make this all a lot easier and more accessible to more people. I mean, the idea that Election Day is a weekday instead of a weekend.
Do you think a Saturday election or a Sunday election would draw a larger turnout? Or
I think
say,
it would.
Man, I'm busy on those days. Those are my fun days.
That's when I'm doing something I want to do. I think it would. Or if there were a holiday, right? If it were, you don't have to go to work today because it's election day. Other countries that do that see much higher participation than we do.
But we have been increasing participation in recent elections, and I think that has everything to do with the passion that has surrounded recent elections. I mean, when people care about what's going on,
more people.
You know, they vote. When they don't, nothing you can do is going to get them to the polls.
Yeah.
But I do think there's steps we ought to be taking.
Yeah, we're moving, not fast
You don't
enough.
want anybody to say, I couldn't vote.
Yeah.
Watch Beyond the Ballot Box, presented by the Detroit Free Press and One Detroit, Thursday, November 3rd at 7 p.m. on Detroit Public Television.